In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky. And this is a continuation of Chapter 4. And we start now by Gurdjieff continuing his talk about knowledge and being and understanding. And he says, knowledge is one thing, understanding is another thing. People often confuse these concepts and do not clearly grasp what is the difference between them. Knowledge by itself does not give understanding, nor is understanding increased by an increase of knowledge alone. Understanding depends on the relationship of knowledge to being. Understanding is the resultant of knowledge and being, and knowledge and being must not diverge too far. Otherwise, understanding will prove to be far removed from either. At the same time, the relations of knowledge to being does not change with a mere growth of knowledge. It changes only when being grows simultaneously with knowledge. In other words, understanding grows only with the growth of being. In ordinary thinking, people do not distinguish understanding from knowledge. They think that greater understanding depends on greater knowledge. Therefore, they accumulate knowledge, or that which they call knowledge. But they do not know how to accumulate understanding, and they do not bother about it. And yet, a person accustomed to self-observation knows for certain that at different periods of his life he has understood one and the same idea and the same thought in totally different ways. It often seems strange to him that he could have understood so wrongly that which, in his opinion, he now understands rightly. And he realizes at the same time that his knowledge has not changed, and that he knew as much about a given subject before as he knows now. What then has changed? His being has changed. And once being has changed, understanding must change also. The difference between knowledge and understanding becomes clear when we realize that knowledge may be the function of one center. Understanding, however, is the function of three centers. Thus, the thinking apparatus may know something, but understanding appears only when a man feels and senses what is connected with it. We have spoken earlier about mechanicalness. A man cannot say that he understands the idea of mechanicalness if he only knows about it with his mind. He must feel it with his whole mass, his whole being. Then he will understand it. In the sphere of practical activity, people know very well the difference between mere knowledge and understanding. They realize that to know and to know how to do are two different things, and that knowing how to do is not created by knowledge alone. But outside the sphere of practical activity, people do not clearly understand what understanding means. As a rule, when people realize that they do not understand a thing, they try to find a name for what they do not understand. And when they find a name, they say they understood. But to find a name does not mean to understand. Unfortunately, people are usually satisfied with names. A man who knows a great many names, that is, many words, is deemed to understand a great deal. Again, excepting, of course, any sphere of practical activity wherein his ignorance very soon becomes evident. One of the reasons for the divergence between the line of knowledge and the line of being in life, and the lack of understanding, which is partly the cause and partly the effect of this divergence, is to be found in the language which people speak. The language is full of wrong concepts, wrong classifications, wrong associations, and the chief thing is that, owing to the essential characteristics of ordinary thinking, that is to say, to its vagueness and inaccuracy, every word can have thousands of different meanings according to the material the speaker has at his disposal and the complex of associations at work in him at the moment. People do not clearly realize to what degree their language is subjective, that is, what different things each of them says while using the same words. They are not aware that each one of them speaks in a language of his own, understanding other people's language either vaguely or not at all, and having no idea that each one of them speaks in a language unknown to him. People have very firm convictions or beliefs that they speak their own language, that they understand one another. No, let me read that last sentence again. I scrambled that. Okay, people have a very firm conviction or belief that they speak the same language and that they understand one another. Actually, this conviction has no foundation whatever. The language in which they speak is adapted to practical life only. People can communicate to one another information of a practical character, but as soon as they pass to a slightly more complex sphere, they are immediately lost, and they cease to understand one another, although they are conscious of it. People imagine that they often, if not always, understand one another, or that they can, at any rate, understand one another if they try or want to. They imagine that they understand the authors of the books they read, and that other people understand them. This also is one of the illusions which people create for themselves and in the midst of which they live. As a matter of fact, no one understands anyone else. Two men can say the same thing with profound conviction, but call it by different names, or argue endlessly together without suspecting that they are thinking exactly the same. Or vice versa, two men can say the same words and imagine that they agree with and understand one another, whereas they are saying absolutely different things and do not understand one another in the least. If we take the simplest words that occur constantly in speech and endeavor to analyze the meaning given to them, we shall see at once that every moment of his life, every man puts into each word a special meaning which another man can never put into it or suspect. Let us take the word man, M-A-N, and imagine a conversation among a group of people in which the word man is often heard. Without any exaggeration, it can be said that the word man will have about as many meanings as there are people taking part in the conversation, and that these meanings will have nothing in common. In pronouncing the word man, everyone will involuntarily connect with this word the point of view from which he is generally accustomed to regard man, or from which, for some reason or other, he regards him at the moment. One man at the moment may be occupied with the question of relation between the sexes. Then the word man will have no general meaning for him, and on hearing this word, he will first of all ask himself, a Christian or not a Christian? The third man, no. Let me back up a bit. Okay. One man at the moment may be occupied with the question of the relation between the sexes. Then the word man will have no meaning, no general meaning for him, and on hearing this word, he will first of all ask himself, which, man or a woman? Another man may be religious, and his first question will be, a Christian or not a Christian? The third man may be a doctor, and the concept of man will mean for him a sick man or a healthy man. And of course, from the point of view of his speciality, a spiritualist will think of a man from the point of view of his astral body, of life on the other side, and so on. And he may say, if he is asked, that men are divided into mediums and non-mediums. A naturalist, speaking of a man, will place the center of gravity of his thoughts in the idea of a man as a zoological type. That is to say, in speaking of a man, he will think of the structure of his teeth, his fingers, his facial angle, the distance between his eyes. The lawyer will see in a man a statistical unit, or a subject for the application of laws, or a potential criminal, or a possible client. A moralist, pronouncing the word man, will invariably introduce into it the idea of good and evil, and so on and on. People do not notice all these contradictions. They do not notice that they never understand one another, that they always speak about different things. It is quite clear that for proper study, for an exact exchange of thoughts, an exact language is necessary, which would make it possible to establish what a man actually means, and would include an indication of the point of view from which a given concept is taken, and determine the center of gravity of this concept. The idea is perfectly clear, and every branch of science endeavors to elaborate and to establish an exact language for itself. But there is no universal language. People continually confuse the language of different sciences and can never establish their exact correlation. And even in the separate branch of science, new terminologies, new nomenclatures are constantly appearing, and the further it goes, the worse it becomes. Misunderstanding grows and increases instead of diminishing, and there is every reason to think that it will continue to increase in the same way, and people will understand one another ever less and less. For exact understanding, exact language is necessary, and the study of systems of ancient knowledge begins with the study of the language, which will make it possible to establish at once exactly what is being said, and from what point of view, and in what connection. The new language contains hardly any new terms or new nomenclature, but it bases the construction of speech upon a new principle, namely the principle of relativity. That is to say, it introduces relativity into all concepts, and thus makes possible an accurate determination of the angle of thought, for what precisely ordinary language lacks are expressions of relativity. When a man has mastered his language, when a man has mastered this language, then, with its help, there can be transmitted and communicated to him a great deal of knowledge and information, which cannot be transmitted in ordinary language, even by using all possible scientific and philosophical terms. The fundamental property of the new language is that all ideas in it are concerned around one idea. That is, they are taken in their mutual relationship from the point of view of one idea. This idea is the idea of evolution. Of course, not evolution in the sense of mechanical evolution, because such an evolution does not exist, but in the sense of a conscious and volitional evolution, which alone is possible. Everything in the world, from solar systems to man, from man to atom, either arises or descends, either evolves or degenerates, either develops or decays, but nothing evolves mechanically. Only degeneration and destruction proceed mechanically. That which cannot evolve consciously degenerates. Help from outside is possible only insofar as it is valued and accepted, and even if it is only by feeling in the beginning. The language in which understanding is possible is constructed upon the indication of the relation of the object under examination to the evolution possible for it, upon the indication of its place in the evolutionary ladder. For this purpose, many of our usual ideas are divided according to the steps of this evolution. Once again, let's take the idea of man. In the language of which I speak, instead of the word man, 7 words are used. Namely, man number 1, man number 2, man number 3, man number 4, man number 5, man number 6, man number 7. With these 7 ideas, people are already able to understand one another when speaking of man. And I'm going to pause here so that we can digest what we've just heard. My goodness, isn't this interesting? Okay, till soon.